Welcome back to RandomRodShop, folks. Today we're going to see if we can get this top welded back onto this 1967 short wide bed we're working on. Let's get into it. So before we start, I have one of the spot welders coming from Harbor Freight. My lovely bride approved the purchase and my young son's bringing it out today. So I'm going to use a spot welder to weld this thing on. That means I got to get it cleaned up to the bare metal, you know, where it's going to spot weld. But if you don't have a spot welder and you're doing this, now's the time to mark out where you want your holes so that you can drill a hole so you can plug weld this thing. And quite honestly, you need to do it from the bottom side. I mean, you can do it from the top side, but preference would be to do it from the bottom side so the welds are a little more hidden. All right, I'm gonna get this top off, and if you watched the last video, you heard I had a little bit of a problem putting that inner panel in, so I don't know what it's gonna take to get it back out. Let's get the top off, let's get after it. So right now this front header panel is just screwed on, and I discovered when I was putting that inner panel in that it is a tight fit. So need to kind of to give a little more room to get that panel in there. I'm gonna pull this loose so that I can spread this A-pillar just a little bit, see if I can get that panel out. Well, learn something. Instead of trying to go up level, see if you can get it cocked and go in. Because that came out a whole lot easier than it went in. I'm happy about that. When it fell, it looks like I tweaked this corner, so I'm going to have to straighten this corner back out. But we can do that. All right, this thing's had plenty of time for the rust converter to set. Now I need to do it all again. So I'm going to get the wire brush out again, and I got some discs to go on the little Milwaukee die grinder, a little rotor lock sanding disc. Need to get it all cleaned up and get it ready for spot welding. And there's a couple of spots I'm gonna have to fix. You can see that, a little bit of rust right there, so I need to fix that. And it looks like I need to straighten that up. The other thing I need to do is straighten these drip rails up. I had to do quite a bit of prying and, you know, grinding and a little bit of everything to get this top off here. Let me get the grinder and the sander and my whole pile of tools. Get a hammer and dolly out, see if I can straighten up these drip rails. Let's go. All right, I'm not gonna film this whole thing. I'm gonna be here a couple hours. Let me get back to you when I got it all cleaned up. Well, it's the next day, folks. I spent most of yesterday sanding and patching just a couple of Most of it was just grinding and sanding out the rest and recoating everything. I'm getting ready to put the inner liner back in. Got to figure out where I'm going to drill holes, because it's all got to be spot welded back in, and need to drill holes. And probably should have thought about that before I pulled it out the first time, but I didn't. So we're going to put this thing back in, and let's see if it goes together any easier this time than it did than the first time. It came out all right last time, but all right. Let me see if I can get this in. Well, that was fun. All right, let me Let me mark some holes on there and probably take it out again. All right, let me get back to you. Well, there's always something interesting. All right, let me show you what we've got. All right, now I remember talking about this in the earlier video, but the angle of this flange on this new panel and the angle on this flange on the existing one, they're not exactly at the same angle. So it's not wanting to come together on the inside. You can see that crack down there. So I'm gonna have to massage this just a little bit, figure out which one, figure out where it's at. I think the easiest one to work with is probably the new panel. I'm gonna get a rounded nose punch or chisel, and I'm gonna probably tink on this along with a pair of pliers, channel locks, and bend this flange up. And let's try this again. Really like to close that crack up before we start even thinking about drilling any holes or putting any screws in. All right, I'm gonna set the camera up over here and let's see what we can do. Well, I think the chisel is the right approach. And I also think that I'd be happy with about 20 vice grips. All right, well, you see what I'm doing. I'm gonna just keep going along here and clamping and tapping and clamping and tapping. And at some point, I'll be able to get this thing screwed together. I'm beginning to think that I've got some access behind this. I'm beginning to think I'm gonna just drill all the way through, use a piece of copper on the back, and just plug weld it. Once I get this thing set, probably not taking it out again. All right. Well, let me keep pecking on this thing and see if I can get this inside lined up, and I'll bring you back. All right. Well, I got it all clamped, and I put screws in it. I forgot to say, there's actually alignment holes in the back panel and on the headliner. There's 3 of them. There's one here, there's one in the middle, and there's one down there. That way it kind of helps you align everything up. It sort of gets you in the ballpark for getting those lined up. I wish I could tell you there's an easy way to get that lined up, but I didn't find it. You can see I got clamps and hammers. Got a little block of wood that, depending on which piece was out too far, I clamped it down and then used the block of wood to kind of tap it back together. And given I don't have you need vice grips that's got the open jaw like that, not the flat ones, because you got to get around this lip here. So you need that open jaw. Now down here there wasn't enough room to get the big vice grips in, so I used some small meter nose. I actually had to bend that out of the way. I wouldn't suggest trying to bend that ledge all the way across. That kind of helps keep everything straight, but I didn't really have a choice down here. So you can see it's bent out there and it's bent out right there. I'll straighten those back up, but that was the only way I could figure out how to get this thing clamped. And so basically I put 2 clamps on at a time and then drilled like 3 holes, then moved the clamp, took my block on the inside and tapped it back and forth, clamped it again, and I just worked my way from the center out on both sides. Now my plan right now, given I got this thing in here, and it appears to be pretty good on the inside, I think I'm going to do like I did on the 57. I'm going to go ahead and pull a screw out, and in places it looks like it needs another screw, I'll put another screw in there. But basically, pull a screw out, I'll drill probably a 1/4 inch hole through there, slide me a piece of copper on the back side, then I'll plug weld that hole up. That way I still keep all the screws in there to keep this thing aligned. And so basically I'll just work my way around, taking 1 screw out at a time until I get this thing welded together. I'm not sure well, as I said before, I haven't figured out an easier way to do this, because the replacement panel, and you can't expect, the truck is old, and that's an aftermarket panel. It's hard to tell which one's slightly out of whack. But at this day and age, when this truck was made, I doubt the GM put that much effort in it. Remember that seam, maybe not always the best. All right, I believe once you get that in, the rest of this is pretty straightforward. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to put the top on it. You can see I've got screws along the edge here holding this whole thing together. And those screws are actually where the top goes. So I'll need to take those screws out, but everything tells me I ought to screw this thing all together before I do any welding on it, just to make sure. So need to put the front rail back in it, and then I'll go ahead and pull these screws out, and we'll lay the top on this thing. Then I'll clamp it together. Remember, we had a gap on that front. We had a gap on the front rail up there, so I'll see at this point in time, can I close that gap up and does everything fit? I think that's probably the right approach. All right, I'm gonna pick up the tools, take these screws out, and we'll put that front header back in and lay this top back on. All right, I'll get back at you when I got that top back on there. and we'll see how good it fits. All right. All right. Well, I've got it all clamped on, and this bottom gap, I don't think you can see it, but this bottom gap is closed up, and you can see I got clamps all the way around holding the roof on. This is probably the final problem. So the curvature of the replacement panel isn't quite the same as the curvature of the cab. Now, in our case, you know, we're kind of between a rock and a hard spot, because we don't know whether the cab is slightly tweaked or that is slightly tweaked. In the end, I'm going to do my best just to make them match up. It's not that much, but it's enough that I want it fixed before I weld it together. The same thing's true on this side. All right, I don't know, it's not 1/8 of an inch, it's like a 1/16 or something, but I can feel it. When you get back here, it's not so bad, although it's not uniform. All right. Turns out you can get through the cab light, and you can actually get a little pair of needle nose vice grips in there, and you can clamp the outer roof skin to the back wall, just to kind of give you a little tension to pull it together. Because I can tell you, it doesn't want to just fall together. There's a gap there, so you need to kind of pull it together. But without a doubt, I'm gonna have to weld something on here so that I can pull these two pieces together so that I can weld it. All right, I'm gonna have to get some more lead off of this before I start monkeying with it. There's still pieces of the original lead on there. Sure be nice to be able to just put screws in that and then spot weld it together. But I haven't figured that out. So it looks like, everything being equal, it does look like it's all going to fit. And it's going to look pretty good. So I'm happy about that. I think I'm going to sit back and I'm going to think about this for a bit. And then I'm going to pull the top back off. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and leave the header panel. I'm going to leave the header panel in there. I don't see any reason to pull it off at this point. But I'll pull the roof off, get the welder out, and I'll weld that inner panel. And probably go ahead and clamp this together. So this got to be spot welded along here too, on both sides. Although that's not the most critical. The critical piece right now is to get that inner flange welded together, because everything else, I believe, can be done from the outside. But I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna drink me a Mountain Dew, and I'm gonna ponder this, because we're kind of at the point of no return. I would sure hate to make a mistake right now. Oh, by the way, these are the little 1-inch clamps at Harbor Freight, and I can't tell you how much I use these. You know, I've got other sizes of the clamps, but I can tell you these little 1-inch clamps. Get into Harbor Freight, just grab you 3 or 4. I probably got a couple of dozen of them at this point, but they are handy. Wouldn't think so, but they really are. All right. I'm gonna get back with you after I drink my Mountain Dew and I ponder. All right, let's weld it in. Now, just as a reminder, so I had all the screws in there. I came back with a 1/4 inch drill and I drilled a hole in between the screws. Then I used a piece of copper, and if you haven't used this before, or you haven't seen this idea, if you're plug welding, this is the way to do it. You slide that in behind. In my case, I slid it behind those 1/4 inch holes I drilled, and basically that keeps you from blowing out that hole. Anyway, if you haven't used a piece of copper, and you can take copper pipe and mash it, you can do whatever you want. But the MIG won't stick to the copper, it dissipates the heat. It transfers the heat so fast that it doesn't melt. And it allows you to do a really good weld without blowing out. That's if you can get this in behind there. If you can, that's the way to do it. All right, so that's all welded down. I'm gonna take a wire brush. I ain't gonna get too excited with cleaning that up. I think that turned out pretty good. So that top is pretty much where it's gonna be. Now we still have to plug weld this inside where the rubber goes, right? Plug weld all that together. And we're gonna have to plug weld the front of this all together. I don't think there's any more welding inside here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get this cleaned up. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna throw some paint on there and just paint everything I can get some paint on. Then we're gonna put the top on this thing and see if we can figure out what's the best way to attach this top. So the flange is really small on the top, and so I think I probably need to if I'm gonna plug it with a MIG, I need to plug weld it from the bottom. Now, I've got a spot welder, you know, one of those Harbor Freight things, and I would really like to use it on this, but on the front it's not a big deal, that's new sheet metal. But on the sides, it's still 2 layers here, and there's still quite a bit of rust in there. So I don't actually know if spot weld will actually work. Spot weld kind of needs clean metal. I think I'm gonna get the vacuum cleaner, I'm gonna clean this up and wire brush it, and I'm gonna paint everything. Then I'm gonna sit down and drink another Mountain Dew and think about how I'm gonna weld this top on. All right, got it painted. I wasn't overly careful. I just tried to get paint everywhere I could get paint. All right, well, let's get the top on it because I suspect we're gonna need to do some work. All right, let me show you what my plan is. So this back is kind of wavy, kind of all the way across. Some places, like right here, that's a little high and that's a little low. We get over here, that's high and this side is low. So I've got my vice grips back in there, and that's the center, and that feels just about right. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to spot weld these nails on here on the side that's low, and then I've got this thing that stud goes in there and you lock it and you can pull it up. So if the side with the stud is low, my thinking is I can pull it up and then I can tack it with a MIG, and then I'll just have to work my way around, you know, starting at the center and moving out. Once I got these corners clamped, and it's interesting, the size of that ball on that C-clamp fits down that C-channel, and just barely. So it's actually, that C-clamp is actually holding this new panel in, which is a good deal. So by pushing it in, it's rolling this out, but there's enough movement here. I am unconvinced at this point how much I'm going to have to fight these corners. It's not far out. I don't think it's 1/8 of an inch there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start spot welding, get the MIG fired up. Actually I shouldn't say MIG. I'm going to use flux core on this. I like the flux core because I can really dial it in, kind of like a knife in terms of the end of the tip. The MIG's got such a big cup on it that sometimes it's hard to see details. So I'm going to use a flux core and tack it here, and then this is high, that's low, so I'll put a stud right there, pull that up, tack it there, move to the other side, and on this side this is high and this is low, so I'll put the stud down here and see if I can get this level, and then I'll just slowly work my way back and forth until we get it all tacked in there. That's the plan anyway. You know how the best laid plans of mice and men go, right? Well, I didn't get it up high enough. Need to raise it up some more. You know, I bought one of those magnetic MIG holders, but I think I loaned it because I wasn't using it. Now I'd really like to have it. Okay. Well, I think that's going to work. I need to go ahead and make it all the way around. Doesn't make very good YouTube. I'll catch you back on when I get it all tacked in place. All right. Well, you can see all the nails on there. That's where I pushed and pulled and pried, and it actually looks pretty good. I'm happy about that. Well, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out so far. It's been kind of tough, but it looks like it's going to fit all right. If you're interested, now we got to this point, I got a playlist. It'll pop up here somewhere. And if you like what we do here, consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. Leave a comment. It helps that algorithm. And until next time, I'm Random at RandomRodShop, and I'm out of here.